Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution.
Reverend Wendy presents a talk that explores and expresses the truths of unity. Reverend Wendy helps us understand that God is all there is and we are one with God, and that there are real-world practical things that we can do to deepen our experience of spirituality and help us in our daily lives.
Alrighty, well, we are taking a look, as I said earlier, at some of the much-loved and favorite parables of Jesus. How many of you are familiar with the parable of the talent? Raise your hand if you are. Okay, not a whole lot of you. Well, you will be at the end of the message today. I will read it to you as it appears in the Gospel of Matthew, although I need bigger print than in my very old Bible, so I've transcribed it and it's in my notes, but it comes right from there. And for those of you in Unity that maybe appreciate Unity's perspective on the Bible and feel a little concerned anytime you see that, let me put your mind at ease and remind you that Unity is first and foremost principle-based. We're based in spiritual principles and spiritual teachings and spiritual practice. And we do go to the Bible, and we do recognize that within the Bible, and especially within a lot of Jesus' teachings, we have a beautiful blueprint for awakening in consciousness. But we don't look at the Bible as the inerrant, infallible Word of God. We do not take it literally. We are principle-based. But we are going to take a dive this month in looking at some of the parables that Jesus taught. It's said in the Gospels that except in parables, he did not teach. And so the idea of parable, or the idea of story, was in fact a very important way in which Jesus tried to convey ideas, not just on the surface, but in a deeper way. So here's the parable, and then we'll unpack what it means both in the obvious meaning and what it means to us mystically and metaphysically. For it is as if a man, going on a journey, summoned his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Important point there. To each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. The one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew, did you not, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to those who have, more will be given, and they will have abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. Pretty harsh, would you not say? Pretty harsh. There are a lot of important ideas conveyed in this parable, on the obvious level as well as on the deeper metaphysical level. In my version of the Bible, there's a footnote that says that a talent was worth more than 15 years' wages of a laborer. I share that with you to put in perspective what this parable is trying to convey. And I did some math yesterday. I thought, okay, I want to know just how valuable these talents were, a measure of worth, a measure of money. So if we were to take the national minimum wage in our country, which today is $7.25 an hour, and we were to multiply that by 40 hours a week, by 52 hours a year, by 15 years, we would get $226,200 per talent. And if we took the California minimum wage, it would be a whole lot more. At $11 an hour, that would figure out to be $343,200 per talent. So the 1-talent servant got that, the 2-talent servant got the equivalent of twice that, and the 5-talent servant got the equivalent of 5 times that. What is Jesus conveying here? Well, there's always in the parables, there's 2 levels of meaning. There's the obvious, and then there's the deeper one. On the obvious level, there are 3 very simple yet important and powerful teachings. The very first one is use what you've been given or lose it. Let's affirm that with a little more energy. Use it or lose it. Use it or lose it. How many of you have ever been involved in a rigorous aerobic exercise program, got your body in shape, and then, I don't know, the holidays come, or a vacation comes, and you kind of slip, and you don't do it, and you don't do it, and you don't do it, and you get back, and you say, I better go back to that program. What does it feel like? It's harder, isn't it? Why? Because you stopped doing that thing. Use it or lose it, right? Use it or lose it. That's true on so many very simple, basic levels in life. I remember when we were when I was leading all of our trips to Peru, every single day during that time period, I would practice a little bit of Spanish. And I was actually getting kind of good at part of it. I could actually sit on a Southwest airplane and read the version in Spanish of what the CEO of Southwest was writing. I couldn't say it, but I could actually get the gist. Now, it's been a few years since I've led a trip to Peru. I'm not practicing it every single day. I'm starting to lose whatever it was that I had gotten. So on a very simple level, the obvious teaching is whatever you got, you better use it, you better put it in circulation, or you're going to lose it. The second very obvious is that we've all been given something to develop according to our ability. According to our ability. In metaphysics, we would say by right of consciousness. In metaphysics, we would say by the mental equivalent. We have been given something. One servant was entrusted with the 1 talent. The other servant entrusted with 2 talents. The other servant entrusted with 5 talents. We have all been given something to develop. And the third important and obvious message of the parable is that we're expected to develop what we've been given, ultimately it's up to us if we're going to do it or not. Ultimately, it's up to us if we're going to use what we've been given, put it in circulation, expand it, or out of fear we do nothing. We put it in the ground, we hide it. There's no multiplication involved. No expansion of consciousness involved. It's a little bit like when Jesus talked about us being the light of the world, right? He told us to do what with the light? To let it shine. To let it shine. And he very specifically said, you don't hide it. You don't put it under a bushel. You bring it out. You set it out for all the world to see. Many people are fully aware of what their talents are. Our talents are our unique gifts, our resources, what we've got to work with. And we all have at least something. Sometimes our talent is the very thing we got in trouble for as a kid. I wonder how many successful CEOs and business leaders might have gotten in trouble for being a little too bossy on the playground. But hopefully if they're good CEOs and good business leaders, they learned through trial and error or somehow to kind of smooth those rough edges and take that raw energy and refine it and develop as an astute leader, a business mind, right? How about the fiction writer, the best-selling writer? Were they the child that lived in their head, in their imagination, and just had the most vivid storytelling mind going on as a little person? And maybe they got in trouble for that. Maybe they were told, get real. Or maybe the famous actor or actress was the one who was always showing off, always wanting to be in the front of the room, always wanting to grab attention, and eventually honed that kind of rough and not so perfected yet, raw energy and way of being into amazing talent. So sometimes the very thing that we might have gotten in trouble for as a kid that came so naturally to us, though in rough, unpolished form, may be the very thing that we are most primed to be able to offer to the world and put into circulation, not only for our own good, but for the good and the betterment of all those that we come in contact with. So on the deeper level, though, these three servants, the 1 talent, the 2 talent, and the 5 talent, represent in us an awakening of consciousness. An awakening of consciousness. Say that with me. An awakening of consciousness. An awakening of consciousness. The first 2 servants share something in common. The servant that was given the 5 talents and the servant that was given the 2 talents, they weren't given the same amount, but they were both given something, and they share something in common. What is it that they shared in common? Okay, they doubled it, but that's the result of what they did. What did they share in common? They put it to work. They used it, right? They used it. We don't know if they were afraid or not. It doesn't say they were afraid. It says the 1 talent servant was afraid. He was afraid of his master and went and took what he was given and hid it. We can perhaps assume that the other 2 were not afraid, but despite whether they were or not, what they share in common is they were given something, right? And they took it and they put it in circulation. And in putting it in circulation, there probably was, risk involved, right? Right? When you get out and you begin to cultivate and use whatever gifts you've been given, on the front end, there's usually risk involved. People may not appreciate your gift. They may not recognize it. It may not be very good in the beginning, right? We don't all start at the top of our game. We work our way to the top of our game. So the first 2 servants represent the individual mind that has begun its inner work. That's really key and important. It represents the individual mind that has begun its work in consciousness. It's begun its work in consciousness. But most of us start off not like the 5 talent servant or the 2 talent servant. We usually start off like the 1 talent servant. We're kind of afraid. Life can feel big and scary at times. We're unsure of what to do with what we've been given. And out of fear of making a mistake, we choose to do nothing at all. It's the mind that is not yet open. It is the mind that has not yet begun to do its deep inner personal work. It's the mind, the consciousnness that is still living in the realm of feeling as if life is always happening to them. Right? I just always am in the wrong place at the wrong time. Things just never turn out for me. It's always because of this person or this thing or that thing, right? You've met people like that in your life, have you not? Yes? Have you ever noticed that sometimes you might be like that? I notice there are still times that I can be like that, right? Consciousness, as it opens and expands, we move beyond that place of feeling a victim of circumstances, of feeling that life is just happening to us. We move away from feeling afraid of everyone and everything. The 2-talent mind, like the 5-talent mind, is the mind that is starting to do some work, is starting to open up. Can you remember when you first got into this teaching and you first started learning some of the principles and you first started learning the power of consciousness, that thoughts really are things, that you can actually choose what you're going to think, and as you begin to choose and get better at what you're going to think and what you're going to hold in consciousness, that the feelings that come out of that change, and the feelings that come out of that change and the decisions you make and the actions you make begin to change. And voila, your life begins to unfold in a much better way. Can you remember when you first really grabbed hold of this idea of the power that you have? Nod your head if you know what I'm talking about. It's really important from time to time to go back and remember that moment, or remember those experiences. To remember when we really got, oh my goodness, life isn't happening to me. I can co-create my life with and through the power of God or Spirit by whatever name I choose to give that. The 2-talent servant represents the mind that is beginning to get that is beginning to realize its own co-creative power and energy, and that's so exciting. That's so exciting, and it's so important and so powerful. Getting beyond that place of victimization to that place of co-creation. Say the word with me. Co-creation. Co-creation. Co-creation is in partnership. In partnership with what? In partnership with the divine, in partnership with God, in partnership with the infinite presence. The 2-talent servant also represents that experience of consciousness that begins to be a bit more balanced. It's open and it's balanced. It's balanced in the recognition that there is value in thinking and feeling. It's balanced in the recognition that there is value in the inner and the outer. It is balanced in the recognition that there is value in the masculine within us and the feminine within us. It doesn't pick sides. It recognizes the exquisite beauty of the both and cultivates that balance. It is only when we move to beginning to become more awake, represented by first the 2-talent servant and then the 5-talent servant, that there's a multiplication. The 1-talent servant didn't lose what he was given, right? But it didn't expand. Do you really want to live out your life not taking whatever gift and potential that is uniquely yours and not doing everything you possibly can to magnify that, to strengthen that, to make it more beautiful, more powerful, more influential? What is that Henry David Thoreau quote about wanting to be all used up at the end? Somebody famous said something like that. Maybe it wasn't Thoreau, maybe I'm forgetting, but the idea of just wanting to be used up, not wanting to die with your song still inside of you, right? Well, that requires putting that in circulation. It requires a certain willingness to cooperate with and co-create with Spirit. And when we do that, one of the results is a magnification of our good. The 2-talent servant doubled what he was given. the 5-talent servant. So the 2-talent represents the inner and the outer. The 2-talent represents the consciousness that is beginning to recognize it's not a victim. It is co-creative with spirit. The 5-talent servant is represented in us of the mind that is beginning to spiritualize all of its senses. Beginning to spiritualize all of its senses. When you think of 5, what do you think of? When I think of 5, I think of my 5 senses. I think of my 5 senses. I think of how wondrously, I think it was Paul in the New Testament who said, how marvelously and wondrously we are made. And indeed we are. I mean, when was the last time you really thought about your 5 senses and what your life would be like if any one of them was significantly diminished or you lost one of them? Your sight. What would it be like not to have the ability to see anymore? To see the faces of the people that you love, to see the delight in a child's smile and eyes, to see the beauty of the world that we live in? What is it to spiritualize our sight? To take it beyond just the physical, which is looking out and taking in, but to spiritualize our sight is to develop keener insight. It is to see more the way Spirit or God might see. The closest that I know to get anywhere near that is to challenge myself to not be fooled by the appearances that I see around me or in my life, especially if those appearances seem chaotic or challenging or difficult, to say, wait a minute, how would, if I were to look at this problem, this opportunity, this situation, not the way from Wendy's limited human vision point, but if I were to try to imagine how the infinite would see it, how God would see it, I'd see something very different, and I'd probably feel very different moving toward it or working with it. It's to lift my vision above the appearances. Hearing. None of us would want to give up our ability to hear, right? And even though as we get older, maybe it goes down a little bit, we do everything we can, do we not, to try to maintain the ability to hear the voices of the people that we love, to hear the music that we love, to hear the sounds of nature that we love. What is it to spiritualize the sense of hearing? I think it is to fine-tune our attunement to God, our ability to listen for and to that still small voice within us. So much of the Bible is about trying to listen to and follow the instruction of or the voice of God. And some people actually believe that God stopped talking when that thing was finished. Nothing could be further from the truth. The way that we look at God in unity is as an infinite presence and intelligence equally available to every single one of us. And to spiritualize our sense of hearing is to tune into that wisdom, that guidance, that intuition of spirit. Taste. What would taste be? Can you imagine completely losing your sense of taste? Might help with a diet, but that's about the only thing I can think of that might be beneficial. But the sense of taste, think about a favorite food that you enjoy, right? What is the sense of taste if it were to be spiritualized? What is the sense of taste? I think it's a sense of discernment. The sense of discernment. To be able to... Sometimes Jesus, I think, is misunderstood. A lot of times I think Jesus is misunderstood and misquoted. And I think it is wrong to think that Jesus said, you're never to judge. That's not accurate to what the scripture says he said. He said, judge not according to appearances. Judge not according to appearances. That's the complete teaching. That's the complete teaching. We need to be able to discern. We need to be able to determine for ourselves right from wrong, if you will, the higher path, the more true path, the higher and brighter way. So discernment is to judge rightly and to cultivate that. Would you not say that that would be a very important experience to cultivate spiritually? I think very, very, excuse me, very, very much so. And how about touch? What is touch? What is touch? How many of you feel like you, and I use the word feel here, how many of you would describe yourself as very tactile? You go into a store and you don't want to just see the thing hanging, you want to what? Touch it. You want to feel it. You want to experience the texture of it. Life has a texture. Life has a texture to it. To be able to touch, to me, is to be able to increase my sense of awareness, my fine-tuning, if you will, my intuition, to really be able to sense when something is the right path for me, the change for me, the movement for me. Does that make sense? And what of smell? What would it be like to spiritualize that? Have you ever thought of that? Would you want to give up your sense of smell? I don't think so. Now, there may be some things we prefer not to smell, right? But the sense of smell is a sense of recognition. Do you know that I believe I have this right, one of the very first senses to develop in a newborn is the sense of smell. And it is extremely heightened. And there are experiments that have been done that show that the very first time a baby is laid on its mother's chest, that baby will recognize that mother and mother's milk instantaneously when placed anywhere else. Why? It's a biological necessity. It's a biological necessity. Recognition. Don't you want to be able to heighten your sense of recognition and resonance? Don't you want to be able to feel and to know at the very deepest gut level of what is highest and best and right for you? Nod your head if you do. Absolutely. So the 5-talent servant is about this idea of appreciating as we grow in consciousness that we are growing and developing all of our senses heightened to a spiritual level. So that when we walk through our life, when we do what is ours to do, we are doing it as a multi-sensory spiritual being. That we are not just this physical being, that we are so much more than that, and we have the ability to interpret and to read into and to experience life at much higher and deeper levels. So as I wrap this up, these servants represent in us the elevation and expansion of consciousness. The first being that consciousness that does not yet realize its own power and potential, that consciousness that still interprets life as something that is happening to them. The 2-talent servant being the expansion and opening of consciousness where we recognize, oh my gosh, I can co-create with spirit. There is an energy and power available to me that I can work with. Life is not happening to me, life is happening by me. And then the 5-talent servant expanding and developing its inner senses and abilities is the consciousness that recognizes that it goes even beyond life happening by me to life is happening through me and life is happening as me. I hope that you'll play around with some of these ideas this week and you'll notice where you are in your own thinking and in your own way of being, and that you'll begin to move more and more into the state of greater awakening. Consciousness, our consciousness, wherever we are on the spectrum, is always being magnified. That's important. Our consciousness, no matter where we are on the spectrum, is always being magnified, and even a tiny improvement of awakening is going to result in greater good coming into our life and through our life. Namaste.
The Unity Center, spiritually progressive, socially responsive, radically inclusive. We have services on Sundays at 9 and 11. Many people enjoy Reverend Wendy's talks and meditations and aren't able to attend the Unity Center in person. If you're part of our extended family from around the world and would like to help support the Unity Center, please go to our website or download our free app, which offers even more ways to connect with the Unity Center. Namaste.